Okay, hello again. It's Liz Thompson from Sew and Learn with Liz. Today I thought I'd share a In the Hoop embroidery project with you. Since I retired from my full-time job at the end of June, I have had a little more time on my hands to do things I promised myself for many years I would do. And one of the things I've been doing is exploring some of the embroidery design companies that are out there that I really just didn't have time to spend on before. So one of those companies that I have now bought a couple of designs from is Sweet Pea Designs. Now I do believe they're based in Australia. I think it's Australia, but they do operate, they ship things out of the United States. But most times I've been purchasing an embroidery design that I download. So I will move to my camera at the machine in a moment. But before I do that, I will tell you that I have already embroidered all the blocks for this tote bag. You embroider each block and it is applique in the hoop, and then you trim the blocks and you sew them together and you make a tote bag. And as I say, I've already done all the blocks in black, red and white for a friend of mine. And now I have started working on the blocks for my bag, and I'm choosing to use some bright colors and lime green, because lime green is one of my favorite colors. So without any further ado, let's switch to the machine. Okay, so here we are at the machine, and I have my design loaded on the screen of my machine, and it is this design that I have already stitched out in another colorway for a bag I'm making for my friend. So it's obviously a pair of scissors with our sewing tote theme. The design is from Sweet Pea Designs, and I purchased it on the internet, and it was a download that I could make immediately. I believe there are, oh goodness me, there must be about 8 or 10 designs on the collection that I bought. All right, so what I did, in the interests of, you'll see here, I've got one square of batting laid over, let's just point over here. All right, let's find where you can see it better, and you will see that I have got tearaway stabilizer in my hoop. All right, here it is here. And I sprayed that with a little bit of glue, and then I laid over the top my batting, where I have got it at the bottom of the hoop here. Now the design comes in different sizes, and what I did was I chose one of the designs, and then at the machine I made that design 10% smaller. So this square at the top here is actually 10% of the design that I brought into the machine. The reason for that is that I wanted to be able to fit 2 hoopings of the same design in the hoop. Now the reason I did that was because it saves on stabilizer, and I just think it actually makes it's quicker. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't have to stop halfway and take everything out of the hoop and then rehoop with new tear away and everything. All right, so I have stitched the batting at the top. What I did in order to have 2 designs in the hoop is I resized this one here at the top to 90%, and then I copied it and then brought that second design down to the bottom of the hoop just by using my jog arrow straight down to the bottom of the hoop. I don't have an awful lot between the 2 designs, but I have enough to sew these blocks together. And there are 8 different blocks, and you embroider 2 of each block, because there's one on the front of the bag and one on the back of the bag. So you end up, when you're ready to start sewing your bag together, you end up with 16 different, well, not different blocks, but 8 times 2 equaling 16 blocks. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to set the machine going to stitch the placement line, or oh, my needle was not threaded, or it had come unthreaded while I was talking to you. So what I have done is I've laid the batting on the stabilizer. I did use a little bit of spray glue. You could have used a tearaway stabilizer that was sticky, but I do want to tear that paper off the back of this batting. So I'm all about, you know, making life easy, and if I have sprayed or used a sticky stabilizer, then I'm going to struggle a little to get that paper off the back of the batting. All right, so there it has stitched its line around my batting, and so what I'm doing is I'm just rough cutting along to remove the excess batting that I'm not going to need. You can keep those batting and, you know, put them together with that batting tape if you want for a future project, but I have a bag under my table, a brown paper bag, and I throw all my bits and pieces of scraps in there, and they go into pillows for the homeless. So I don't send my bits and pieces to the landfill. Right, now I am not going to continue stitching on the top square. I am now going to continue stitching on this lower square or lower block, and I am going to put this fabric on the top. Now, because it's already stitched down, we do know that where my batting is and where this fabric is going to be stitched. So I am making sure that I am covering the entire area that just stitched with my fabric. So there I am. I'm going to let it stitch now all the way around. They do say in the instructions, and as I said to you, this is a design from Sweet Pea Designs, and I believe it's called a sewing tote, and they have very good instructions. It's a PDF file which you can download, and you can print it out if you wish to use the file that way, or if you want to save paper and be eco-friendly, you don't really need to print it out. What you can do, of course, it's not going to cut very straight when you're trying to do it at a very funny angle. So now, if you look at that piece of fabric, I could possibly use it for something else, but it's starting to get on the small side, so whoops, it goes under the table into my paper bag. All right, so the next thing we're going to do now is we are going to stitch these fabric pieces that are in the cream and the red and black. We're going to stitch them onto each corner of our block. So the first one that's showing up is actually down in this bottom left corner, and so I'm going to stitch that. I'm going to advance it just one stitch, and I'm going to let it stitch that line. Basically what it is well, not basically, it is a placement line, and I have a sort of olivey green color in the machine right now, and it's a polyester embroidery thread, which is perfectly fine to use that thread for piecing. And so here we go. Now I am going to put my fabric down and stitch it again. That was the placement line. Now we're going to stitch the piecing line. So I want to then be able to flip my fabric backwards. So I don't do it like this, because I'm not going to flip the fabric that way. I'm actually going to do it like this. And so there is my placement line, and I don't want to waste fabric, so I am going to be fairly frugal with my fabric up here just behind the foot of the machine, and I'm going to lay the fabric down just beyond that line that's stitched, and then I'm going to stitch the stitch again. Actually, it does one little stitch and then comes down to the bottom and stitches back up the same direction it did earlier. And you will see now that it has left me with a little, basically 1/4 inch seam. And so now I am going to pull the fabric over there, and I can just smooth it. You could, if you wanted, you could use embroidery tape, and I'm just going to reach over and get a roll of it so that you can see what I mean. This is embroidery tape. This happens to be Kimberbell tape that I buy from a local wholesaler, but many quilting and sewing stores have this tape. It's actually very, very similar to surgical tape. So if you have a way of getting inexpensive surgical tape, it doesn't have to be this width, which looks to me like it's about 1 inch wide, maybe slightly longer than 1 inch. Let me go and have a look here. Nope, it's 1 inch wide. Go ahead and get surgical tape and use that. I have, in a real pinch, used masking tape, but I really don't like using masking tape because it is too gluey and it leaves glue residue on my fabric. But I have used painter's tape, because of course painter's tape is made specifically so that you use it when you're cutting and doing painting on your walls. You're cutting into the edges around doors and windows and things like that, and so it does not leave a residue on your wall. So painter's tape is for sure better than masking tape. All right, so the next thing that's going to stitch is going to be the little line round the edge of the block, the bottom left hand corner of the block. Basically I am stitching my fabric down, and that's now done. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a feature I have on my machine that I simply couldn't live without, and that is a feature where I can bring my hoop forward. And I need to actually move the camera so that you can see better what I am talking about. All right, so I am now going to come here and I am going to cut away this fabric, because I'm going to be putting the same fabric on all 4 corners of my block. So I obviously need to have my fabric free of that first block that I have stitched. And so now I'm going to set the hoop back to where it was, and let's get this positioned. And I'm now going to move over and stitch the right bottom corner, and that is stitching so that I have a placement line so I know where to put my green fabric. All right, so once again I'm going to come over here and I am going to lay my fabric just beyond the placement line. I do believe, possibly, it's a while since I read the instructions on this embroidery collection, it might be that you can actually lay that edge right on the cutting line. Let's just see if we can do that. Let me move the stitch on. To my way of thinking, it's a little too oh, excuse me, it's a little too close. So I would like to have my fabric maybe 1/8 of an inch, not a whole 1/4 of an inch. I don't think that's necessary, but about 1/8 of an inch beyond that placement line that I've just stitched. All right, so now we're going to stitch that placement line, or sorry, piecing line. And when that is done, we will bring the fabric over this way and smooth it down. Like I said a moment ago, you could use embroidery tape to hold it down. You could also get an iron and come and smooth this with your iron to flatten it. But quite honestly, I don't think it's necessary. These pieces of fabric are not very large, and it's quite adequate just to smooth it with your fingers and hold it, keeping your fingers well out of the way of the needle, to come and stitch it down. And once again, I am going to bring the hoop forward because I really like to be able to see what I'm doing. So it's actually going to take it out of your line of vision of the camera, but it's just a small little piece of fabric, and you saw me cutting it in the last one, so I don't think it's a big problem that you missed seeing how I cut it. All right, and then we are going to go back up to the next placement line, which is up in the top left corner of the block, and there it is. And we're going to do again the same thing. We're going to place the fabric just over that line and let it stitch. And then we're going to flip the fabric over. So this is like a stitch and flip method. And once again, I'm just going to smooth that fabric down and then stitch it around the edge of the block to hold those pieces down so that they don't flap up. And once again, I'm going to bring the hoop forward and I'm going to cut away that little piece of extra fabric. And I've got a little piece of fabric there that can go in my brown paper bag under the table. And then of course we're going to put it back, and there it is, all cut in the top corner. And now what we're going to do is we're going to move to the other corner and we're going to stitch that placement line. And you'll see by me cutting, placing the fabric and cutting as we go, it means that I'm actually being fairly frugal with this fabric. I'm not wasting it, but I am making sure that, oops, I'm doing it the wrong way. Different angle, and I almost got it wrong. I am not wasting too much of my fabric. If I try to figure out on all of these exactly the size of fabric that I'm going to need and then pre-cut them, honestly, it's going to take more time and I think I will waste a lot more fabric. So once again, we flip that back over and get our fingers out of the way, and it will now stitch it down in that top corner. And I'm not going to bring the hoop forward this time because I think I can manage to cut the fabric without having to bring the hoop all the way forward. All right, so the very next color, I do need to change the color that I have in the top of the machine now from my olive green color to a silver metallic thread. And I'm going to put that into the machine and thread up my machine. I do like this silver metallic thread. I've had it actually for years. It's really works well. I know a lot of people have trouble with metallic threads, but this particular one I quite like. Okay, it's a needle with a very small eye and it did not like to thread the needle, so I've just done it manually. All right, so here we are again. What it is now going to stitch, and I know this because I can see the design on the screen of my machine, and we are now going to stitch the the blades of my scissors. So it's going to move down to this middle section of the block, and we are going to see it stitch the blades. Now obviously this is going to take a few minutes, so let's talk about some of the other things. When you are sewing with metallic threads, as I said a moment ago, some people have a lot of trouble with metallic threads. I don't, because I have like a cheat sheet in my head or a list of things that I can do to help me. Now, recently, I was sewing something with this very, very old metallic thread that I honestly think I've had for probably nearly 20 years. And the thread kept breaking and breaking and breaking, and I was saying quite a few nasty sewing words. And so I decided, okay, Liz, you need to put into practice your little troubleshooting steps for troublesome metallic thread. So the things that I recommend are slowing the speed of your machine. Now, right now, my machine is set at the fastest speed, which is 1,000 stitches a minute. Now, when a machine is doing a second stitch, it automatically slows down. That machine is not going at 1,000 stitches a minute right now because it knows that the kind of stitch bill that it's doing shouldn't be done at 1,000 stitches a minute. But if it was doing just a straight stitch or some quilting in the hoop, it would go pretty fast. So I tried slowing the speed. That was the first thing I did, and it was still great. So I thought, okay, time to change the needle. So that's another thing. And I tried a couple of different needles, and in the end found I got the best result from a top stitch needle. The reason that I had a good result with that was because the eye of the top stitch needle is large, and so the thread wasn't rubbing against the eye of the needle as much and shredding all the time. Another thing that you can try, if you've tried those things and it's still not working, is to check that your bobbin thread is a polyester bobbin thread, because if you happen to be using a quilting cotton in your bobbin, that is not as smooth as a polyester thread, and it could be hooking on your metallic thread and causing trouble for you. Another thing that you can do with metallic threads, there is such a thing as a metallic needle. I don't have those. I find I get better results with the top stitch needle. I just thought I'd mention there about the metallic needle. The other thing that I want to mention is there is a product, and I'm going to get this product now and show it to you. It is called Sewer's Aid. Now, the manufacturers of Sewer's Aid are not paying me anything to tell you about their product. This is just my advice to you. I am never without a little bottle of Sewer's Aid. I've probably had this bottle for, who knows, at least 10 years. And it is for smooth hand and machine sewing, is what it says on the bottle. Basically, what it is it's a silicone liquid. All right, it's a sort of thickish liquid. And what you do, and I'm going to take the lid off the little bottle, and I'm going to show you here in the camera, is that when you have got a troublesome thread, if you take this, it's essentially a lubricant, which is what silicone is. And you're going to take your little bottle, and you are going to, all right, something's gone wrong with my stitching there, my metallic thread, so I'll fix that in a minute. But do you see that I am putting a line of this silicone? It's really quite hard to see it in the light. Let me bring it up closer. No, still can't see it. But trust me on this one, I'm taking a little line of the silicone, and I am basically using the little bottle like a pen, and I'm going down the spool of thread, and I do it about 4 times around the spool of thread. And what that does is it lubricates the thread. So let's just say maybe my thread was old and a bit brittle, and we all know that metallic thread is pretty notorious for being delicate. So what I have now done is I have lubricated that thread, and in the end I actually found that that was the answer for me. And I'm just going to hook this thread down here. Actually, let's just take it here, it will probably be easier. And I am going to rethread my needle. And because my needle is really quite a tiny needle, I think it's a size 70 needle, my needle threader doesn't really like threading tiny needles with very tiny eyes. It kind of complains at me and sometimes doesn't thread it. It's fine with 75 and 80 size needles, but 70 is a bit small. All right, so I have now rethreaded my needle, and I am going to set it going again. And in fact, this is what I am going to show you. And it's really good that things like this happen, because you might have it happen to you and not know really how to fix it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this in real close, and you will see that I have started stitching. I don't know if you can see. Let's bring it even closer. Come on, focus. Focus for me, please. Okay, that's better. Do you see that over here is where I started stitching again? But there's a little space in front of that, if I point it out with my scissors, right there, that's like a gap. Now, when your thread breaks, usually the machine goes back 10 stitches, but it could be that the machine sewed on a little bit beyond those 10 stitches. So I'm actually going to take it back probably about 20 stitches until I know. Let's just see. Yep, I'm good. And so now I'm going to set it going again, and it will stitch over that little gap, because I don't want to have a gap in the blade of my scissors later when I have finished embroidery. Obviously, it's just going to go over the top of that little bit that I did after the thread break, but I'm not too worried about that. You won't even notice it. So anyway, as I say, this sewer's aid is a really nice thing to have in your toolbox. The one little word of warning that I will give you is that there is another product on the market. I don't know if their package is the same anymore, but at one stage I had a little bottle of the same size bottle as the sewer's aid, and oh my goodness, it was called Fray Check. And the newer bottle of Fray Check that I have is different packaging, but it was blue writing as well. So I had to be really, really sure that I did not use Fray Check in place of sewer's aid, and vice versa, because otherwise I'd have been gluing my threads together instead of lubricating them and making them easier to cope with in the machine. Okay, so there we go. I do believe, this metallic thread is giving me a little bit of problem today. I think I know what it is that we're using this size 70 needle, and it is quite small, and so what I'm guessing is that the thread is rubbing against the eye of the needle. It is really hard for me to see this eye. Let me try threading it and see if we can win. I'm not sure we will, but we will try. Did you hear? It crunched because the needle threader is actually a little large for the eye of this needle. So let me just try. Right, got it through. Okay, so I have threaded manually, and I am going to just go backwards a few stitches just in case I have a little gap of silver stitching, and away it goes again. And I believe what it is now stitching in the middle of my blades is that little where there's the screw that holds the scissor, the two halves of the scissors together. Okay, so let me just cut this thread when it moves away. Oh, it's not moving away, so I will cut it there. All right, now we don't want to use the silver thread now. So what I'm going to do is take that out, and I am going to thread up the machine with a lime green thread. And again, this is a polyester embroidery thread. And I'm going to thread the machine up. I'm not sure if it's going to manage with, oh come on, don't be naughty now. The thread was winding itself around the spool pin. And I'm going to bring this down and into this little thing behind, which is quite hard to reach when you've got the camera right there. And what we'll do is, once again, I will try my best to thread with the needle threader. Oh, it worked. So obviously the metallic thread was a little thicker than this polyester embroidery thread. So we are good to go. And what I'm now doing is I'm going to stitch a placement line for the fabric that is going to be the handle of my scissors. And you probably shouldn't be doing what I've just done. It's a case of don't do as I do, do as I say. you really should be very careful. I can't tell you the number of times that it's been a near miss with me getting stitched by the needle or some other nasty thing, and we don't want that happening. All right, so what we now have is we have the handles of my scissors are stitched, and I want to put this lime green fabric as the handle of my scissors. So once again, I'm going to make sure that it is fully covering my scissors, and it is. So I'm now going to set it going, and what it's going to do is it's now going to stitch the cutting line of the applique, because in a sense this handles of the scissors are an applique. So it does the one, and then it goes over, and it does, or comes back again and does the inside of the handle, which is basically a circle. And then it's going to go and it's going to stitch down on the other side for the other handle. And again, I could have used embroidery tape to make sure that my fabric didn't shift, but these little fabric piecing and fabric applique and so on in the hoop are really quite small, and I don't think that it's altogether necessary. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring this up again and bring the hoop forward, because I want to show you how we cut the applique. And I know I'm going to have to move the camera again so that you can see better what I'm doing. Alrighty, so we have our lime green fabric down, and I'm going to use my mini duckbill scissors. When you've got small things like that, your mini duckbills are much better than your large duckbills. Do you see? These are the large ones and these are the mini ones, and I find them absolutely invaluable. And I got them some months ago, and honestly I don't think that I will ever be able to live without these duckbill scissors. Now I have not taken the hoop off the machine, and we will see in a moment. Actually, I think I really do need to, because it's very hard to twist your body at a funny angle to cut the fabric. So let me get this back so that you can see it on the camera clearly. Okay, and so I'm going to make sure that the duckbill part of the scissors is under the fabric, and I am cutting, let's get this fabric out of the way, I am cutting underneath there. Now it's starting to get hard for me to get into this little small place here, because my duckbill scissors can't get into that little space. So what I'm going to do is I am just going to come from the other side with my blade, the sharp point of the blade, and there it is. I've gone in and cut there. And now I'm probably going to be blocking the camera, but I will soon be out of the way, and you will see that I'm going around the other side of the scissors. And then last of all, now that I've cut that, I am actually wanting to cut this just a little closer. You do need to try and cut as close to the fabric or the stitching as you can without cutting the stitching. If you do slip and you cut the stitching, it's not the end of the world, because we are going to come back and we're going to do a satin stitch. So you can see that I keep moving this hoop around, because it's hard to contort your body in a variety of different directions to cut this easily. All right, so there's one of the little handles cut, and then when I come to get in to cut it, I just very gently lift up the fabric and make sure that I am not cutting the lime green spotty fabric underneath, because if I do, what you will see in the middle of my scissors is my batting, and we don't want that. We want to see that dotty fabric on the inside. So as I say, when you start cutting this little bit of fabric in the middle of the scissors, you do need to be careful that you only lift the bright lime green layer of fabric and poke your scissors through that. All right, so now I can put my hoop back onto the machine, and I can press this so that it goes back to where it needs to be. And I'm going to reposition the camera so that you can see what is stitching. There we go. Right, so I'm now going to set it going, and it is now going to do a tack down and a satin stitch all the way around the edge of where I have just cut that bright lime green fabric. And that is going to be around all the edges, and you'll notice, if you can see, and yeah, you can see that it's got 2 lines of stitching, one either side of that placement line stitching that was done before we cut the fabric. And that is really good. This has been well digitized because your lime green fabric has much less chance of pulling away from the satin stitching around those scissors. And trust me, many times I have stitched a design and it has not actually helped. And then I've had to do some sort of a little fix-up job. So there you go. It is going to take a little while to stitch the satin stitching all around. All right, that is what it's going to look like when it's done. I chose black fabric in this instance with red around the edges of the scissors. And I'm now going to show you some of the other blocks. So I'm going to move it away a little and let you see on the front of the machine here. This is another one of the blocks. All right, let's get it up actually a little more so that you can see the whole block. All right, there is a block that is one of them. And let me show you the lime green ones I've been working on. This is another one, rather nice actually. It's a sewing machine, and I used my nice lime green thread to do the spool. And again, that's an applique in the hoop. All digitized, terribly, terribly easy. All right, and there is another one in my lime green fabric that is essentially just piecing in the hoop, because you're laying down one strip of fabric after another, and I've chosen to do it in these lime green colors. And here's another one where I have similar fabrics to the one that we're stitching now. And this is another one. I haven't finished all the blocks in the lime green fabric. This is for my bag, because one of my favorite colors is lime green. These were applique in the hoop. So it's like wild geese piecing. There is another one that is a pin cushion, and this is obviously for my friend's bag. And there is the sewing machine for her bag, and the piecing for her bag, and the wild geese or flying geese for hers. And then another block is this one here, which is a spool of thread with flowers coming out of the top of it. And there is her one with the sewing and some spools of thread. I think that is all the blocks that I need to show you. Yes, it is. And so I'm not going to have this block go to the very end of the satin stitching, because quite frankly, I think you get the picture. And so what I'm going to do before we finish off the video is to say that once, and I haven't done this yet, but once all the blocks are completed, I obviously trim them, and I tear away all of this tear away stabilizer on the back of each block. So I'm then left with the fabric that you see and the piece of batting behind the block. And then those are all going to be sewn together, and I'm just quickly going to find a picture of that on my iPad to show you, because it's really quite a nice one. It's not a bag I've made, but it is one that is on the Sweet Pea website, and here it is. All right, so let's see if you can see this. All right, there is the bag. It's a photograph that I just took off the Sweet Pea website. That one happens to be yellow, and I really like that one. And then I can show you another one. That one. I really like that one as well. Done in dark grays and pink. And I'm thinking that I would really like to do a pink and gray one after my lime green one. And then I'll have my husband breathing down my neck because he already wonders why I have so many tote bags. I have more tote bags than I could ever possibly use. All right, so once again, you shouldn't have seen me doing that because it's a naughty thing to do. So as I say, I will then sew all those 8 blocks together and complete the tote bag with lining. And I believe there's a pocket inside as well, according to the instructions that came with the collection of designs. As I say, just before I finish off, I want to mention that below this video on YouTube, you will see where to find my other social media pages. I have a website, and that is sewwithliz.com. I have a blog, which is Sew and Learn with Liz Thompson. And I have an Instagram page, which is Sew Quilt Learn with Liz. And I have a Facebook page under the name of Liz Thompson. And last but not least, I have a Facebook group called Sew and Learn with Liz Thompson. And you're welcome to visit any of those social media pages. Particularly, you can write a question below this video. Make sure you hit the bell so that you'll get a notification when we add more videos, because we're working on new videos all the time. And you may also go to my Facebook group, because if you've attended any of my classes, this one included, watched a video, you may come and ask me questions that may arise while you are making a similar project. Just remember that these designs are purchasable. I purchased them from Sweet Pea, and if you really like this, I would like to suggest that you go to sweetpea.com. Just Google Sweet Pea Designs, and they have a lot of really, really nice designs that you can purchase and then stitch out, and many of them are this very same technique with piecing and applique in the hoop. So thank you so much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you again soon.